Food security. Cabinet approves a revised food security bill. Seeks to protect 2.43 crore poor families under the Antoda Ann Yojana by continuing supply of 35 kg food grains per month per family. Delhi and Haryana among the first states to implement the scheme. European Union plunges into a new crisis. This time separate banking system nears to collapse. Eurozone finance ministers agree a deal on a 10 billion euro bailout for Cyprus. Standing Committee of Parliament recommends cancellation of many coal blocks allocated to private companies. Indicts successive governments for procedural irregularities since 1993. RBI decides to increase validity of in-principle approval of new banking license from 12 months to 18 months. Consent of other related financial regulators necessary for attaining new banking licenses. Department of Telecom imposes huge penalty on Vodafone. The telecom giant is slapped with a fresh penalty of 1,263 crore rupees for alleged underreporting of revenues during financial years 2008-9 and 2010-11. European Union fines 9 pharma firms including Ranbaxy for blocking cheaper drugs. Pharma companies fined a total of 146 million euros for breaching EU antitrust rules. Ranbaxy fined 10.32 million euros. RBI penalizes 22 banks for violating KYC norms, imposes fine of 49.5 crore rupees including SBI, PNB and Yes Bank. Powering SEBI. SEBI gets direct powers to attach properties, bank accounts and can order arrest and detention of defaulters. Companies Bill 2012. New bill set to change how companies in the country function. In a bid to discourage gold imports, government hikes import duty on gold, silver and platinum to 10%. Government expects to earn 4,830 crore rupees from duty hike. Microsoft takes a bold step. Decides to buy Nokia's mobile phone business for 5.44 billion euros. Deal likely to be closed by March next year. Nokia to maintain brand, Microsoft to use it for 10 years. Raghuram Rajan takes over as the 23rd Governor of Reserve Bank of India amidst economic storm. Rajan announces number of reforms for financial stability. Political deadlock over Obama's healthcare reform forces shutdown of the US government. Over 1 million employees and major government services affected. Government starts distributing 5 kg LPG cylinders at petrol pumps in select metros. Scheme aimed at migratory population. State Bank of India gets its first woman chief. Arundhati Bhattacharya assumes charge as chairperson of the State Bank of India. Union Cabinet accords legal status to Aadhaar. Clears bill to make Unique Identification Authority of India a statutory body. Once again, onion prices goes out of reach. Makes India weep as prices hover around 100 rupees a kg. Bad weather and hoarding behind this rise. Supreme Court directs Sahara Group to hand over title deeds of its properties worth 20,000 crore rupees to SEBI. Asks Subrata Roy and other directors not to leave the country without permission. Tale of two diamonds, the pink and the orange diamond. Two of the world's most precious diamonds sell for a combined sale of $118 million. Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh and UPA Chairperson Sonia Gandhi inaugurates the first all-women Bharatiya Mahila Bank in Mumbai. Bank to have 7 branches across the country. Jet Airways Etihad announced closure of transaction for 24% stake sale. Following all regulatory approvals, marks the first FDI infusion by an airline in the Indian aviation sector. Tech wars between Apple and Samsung heats up. A Silicon Valley jury rules that Samsung must pay $290 million to Apple for copying iPhone and iPad features in its devices. The 163-year-old telegram services in the country, the harbinger of good and bad news for generations of Indians, is dead. BSNL discontinued telegrams, following a huge shortfall in revenues. In a major victory for India, the WTO agreed to follow countries to provide subsidy on staple food crops without any threat of punitive actions. The concession salvaged the current round of the World Trade talks from the brink of collapse. 2013 witnessed first ever collapse of spot exchange NSEL. The settlement crisis at NSCL surfaced after the exchange abruptly suspended trading in all but its E-series contracts. On 9 December, it was a blockbuster Monday for markets. Sensex hit a record all-time high of 21,326 levels, up 330 points. Tata Sons pitches in aggressively in the aviation sector. After its tie-up with the Malaysian carrier Air Asia in February for a low-cost passenger air service, it signs a deal with Singapore Airlines to start a full-service airline. Turbulent year for rupee. The Indian currency dips close to 70 against the dollar, though recovers after the government and Reserve Bank of India comes to its rescue, but settles at above 60 per dollar.
Year 2013 would be remembered in the history as a year of ups and downs when it comes to macroeconomics. Let's first take a look at performance of growth rate. The January to March quarter started the year with a weak note when GDP growth rate was recorded just 4.8%. April to June quarter recorded even worse numbers with decade-low quarterly GDP growth at just 4.4%. This was perhaps first time in decade when all three sectors, that is farm, industry and services, shows decline in the performance. July to September quarter, however, was better with 4.8% growth. Growth in services, which is considered to be the backbone of Indian economy, declined to as low as 6% as compared to earlier normal of close to 9% plus. Farm sector, however, was better on good monsoon and farm-centric policies of the government. Industrial growth remained a matter of great concern. Rising input cost and higher interest rate regime marred the sector like never before when industrial production dropped in negative zone. Mining and manufacturing led the decline. For the government, high inflation remained an area of concern across the year. Wholesale Price Index or WPI, which more or less indicates the forthcoming RBI interest rate policy. In January, WPI was somewhere around 7%, which gradually dropped below 5% in the May. But past November, it rose again and crossed the levels of 7%. For RBI, range of interest rates from 3 to 5% is usually considered a soothing situation. Despite several attempts of government to control the inflation, price rise in food articles kept agitating the common man. For most of the year, the food inflation remained over 7%, and for almost 6 months, it was recorded around a worrying level of 10%. On the front of foreign direct investments, 2013 remained a historic year for the Indian economy. After a long round of discussions and debates, clearing all the hurdles in government raised FDI cap in telecom, civil aviation and power exchange. Apart from that, government also flexed the FDI policy in some other fields. FDI cap in telecom sector was raised from 74% to 100%. FDI cap in insurance sector was also increased from 26% to 49%, though the decision would require ratification from the parliament by clearing the insurance amendment bill. The government raised the FDI cap to 51% in multi-brand retail, though it made it very clear that 30% sourcing from domestic companies and 50% investment in infrastructure would be mandatory for any such joint venture. Parliament debated many bills of economic importance, and some of these passed by both houses of the parliament. To simplify the regulations and promoting the transparency, 56-year-old corporate law was replaced by the new act. The issue of contributing 2% of profit as corporate social responsibility caught the headlines and remained a subject of corporate discourse. But lack of consensus on two crucial bills kept the issue of new tax law unsettled. Meanwhile, debate on Direct Tax Code Bill and Goods and Services or GST Bill is still on. Though 2013 witnessed enactment of much awaited land acquisition and rehabilitation bill, but corporate world did not seem too much enthusiastic about it. Food Security Bill also did not witness a smooth passage. A number of economists were of the opinion that rising subsidy would further push the economy downwards. But despite of all the odds, government managed to pass the Pension Fund Regulatory Bill, which will give more teeth to the existing pension regulator.
आज हमारा देश इतना आगे बढ़ गया है कि बाकी दुनिया की नजरों में हम एक महान देश के रूप में उभर रहे हैं। लेकिन उनका एक और नजरिया भी है हमारी तरफ। आइए उसे देखें।
you doing out there?
जाने अनजाने कहीं आप भी दुनिया के सामने अपने देश की ऐसी तस्वीर तो नहीं रख रहे? अपनी इज्जत अपने हाथ। जय हिंद।
अरे सुन तो।
मुझे क्या सुनाना चाहते हो? जो सुनाओ मेरी सौतन को।
किसको?
अरे वही तुम्हारा मोबाइल फोन जिससे सुबह शाम दिन रात चिपके रहते थे और कहते थे किसान कॉल सेंटर से बातें हो रही हैं।
अच्छा ये बात है।
हाँ क्यों, क्या हुआ? अब बात नहीं होती क्या?
अब तो झट से बात हो जाती है।
ऐसा क्या?
हाँ, अब तो ज्यादा लाइनें और खास तकनीक के कारण खेती के माहिरों से तुरंत बात हो जाती है। और अगर कभी लाइन व्यस्त हो तो अपनी समस्या फोन पर रिकॉर्ड करा दो, वहाँ से फोन आ जाता है और समस्या की हल का मैसेज भी आ जाता है। ये देखो आ गया।
अरे वाह, इसका मतलब इंतजार की घड़ी अब खत्म।
हाँ।
तभी मैं सोचूं कि आजकल मुझ पर इतना प्यार क्यों आ रहा है।
कृषि संबंधी समस्याओं का अपनी भाषा में तुरंत हल पाने के लिए पूरे भारत में किसी भी फोन से हेल्पलाइन नंबर पर संपर्क करें। किसानों का दोस्त किसान कॉल सेंटर।
क्या बताया डॉक्टर ने?
तुम्हारी बहू माँ बनने वाली है।
तूने डॉक्टर से पूछा कि लड़का है या लड़की?
लड़का हो या लड़की क्या फर्क पड़ता है?
पहले लड़की का अच्छा पालन पोषण करो, शादी करो तो दहेज की चिंता।
अगर आपके पिताजी आप ही की तरह सोचते और आपको इस संसार में आने से रोक देते तो क्या आज हम यहाँ होते?
तूने मेरी आंखें खोल दी। ला बहू मिठाई ला। अब बेटा हो या बेटी, मेरे लिए दोनों एक समान हैं।
It was the year's biggest story and biggest headache for policymakers. It was the rupee slide against the US dollar. It was the year in which the Indian rupee officially became a senior citizen as it crossed 60 mark against the US dollar. But the situation became grim by the end of August as the Indian currency touched almost 69 mark against the dollar. The fall of rupee badly hurt the Indian economy, affecting major macroeconomic data including growth, inflation and investment. One of the major reasons of fall was the US Fed tapering fears, or to say it in simple terms, unwinding of the American stimulus. This would attract all the US dollar to home currency, draining liquidity from the emerging markets like India. But India wasn't the only country which saw fall in currency. Other emerging markets like Brazil, Indonesia, Russia, Turkey and South Africa also witnessed a huge currency volatility because of fears that the US may end its quantitative easing by year end. But as the year ended, the rupee largely stabilized against the US dollar and is now hovering around 62 mark against the dollar. And the turnaround started to take place after 4th of September when Raghuram Rajan became the governor of Reserve Bank of India.
That the rupee has also stabilized somewhat, and I think that is good news for the economy. Now, the economy is stabilizing, but there is no room for complacency. Some part of the reduction in the current account deficit comes from suppressing gold imports. This was necessary in the short run, but it is not desirable over the medium term. Similarly, not all measures to reduce the fiscal deficit are of the highest quality.
So the doomsday prophecies of many analysts that rupee will hit 70 mark against the dollar came crashing down. And there was a silver lining to the fall of rupee too. Indian exports became cheaper. Exports now have been rising for almost 5 consecutive months and have even clocked double-digit growth in October. Yes, positive news coming from the Commerce Ministry. The exports number have yet again come out in positive territory, and that to double digit. The exports for the October 2013 month have increased by 13.5%, while imports have crashed again and decreased by almost 14.5%. The overall impact of increase in exports and decrease in imports is that the trade deficit has literally crashed. It has crashed to almost 50% when you compare October 2013 figures and October 2012 figures. Apart from volatility in rupee, current account deficit was also another big headache for policymakers. Current account deficit, or CAD, is the sum total of total outflows and inflows in a country. And in India's case, there was more outflow of dollars and India needed to act. A high level of CAD puts pressure on rupee, which had depreciated by almost 15% since April 30th. the government imposed restrictions on import of gold. Remember, gold imports played a huge role in increasing CAD last year. The government increased import duty to 10% from 8% on gold and banned inward shipments of gold coins and medallions. And restrictions worked. Gold and silver imports declined 80.55% to $1.05 billion in November after a slew of measures taken by the government to curb inbound imports of the metal aimed at narrowing the current account deficit. India is the largest importer of gold, which is mainly utilized to meet the demand of jewelry industry. And thanks to the proactive policies by the government of India, CAD came under control. The government on its part said the path of fiscal prudence is the only way forward.
The task before India is to reverse these unintended consequences and lay the ground for faster, more inclusive and sustained growth over the next 5 years. There can be no compromise, and I speak for the government, there will be no compromise on the decision to walk on the path of fiscal prudence and contain the fiscal deficit step by step, year by year, until we reach the goal of 3% of GDP in 2016-17.
In the second quarter of financial year 2013-14, the CAD stood at 1.2% of the GDP, while in the first quarter it was at 4.9%. Both the government and Reserve Bank of India are expecting the CAD to be below $56 billion in the current fiscal compared to a record high of $88.2 billion or 4.8% of the GDP last fiscal. And the year ended on a positive note with the Reserve Bank of India delivering a surprise. In the last policy review of the year, Governor Raghuram Rajan gave a Christmas gift to the markets by not tinkering with key policy rates. Markets had expected 25 basis points increase in the repo rate.
As responsible central bankers, in an environment where there is a weak economy, we have to try and see what is the underlying strength of inflation that we're trying to tackle, recognizing that monetary policy works with fairly long lags. So we will calibrate the level of the policy rate consistent with what we think the underlying inflation is.
But 2014 holds a lot of things for the Indian economy. Financial sector reforms could be a game changer for the economy.
I believe that financial sector reforms can be game changers. We know what the new game changers can be. They include the GST, the Goods and Services Tax, the Direct Taxes Code, the Insurance Laws Amendment Bill, and the Uniform Financial Code recommended by the FSLRC.
But the biggest of all is the General Elections 2014, which will define the direction of the Indian economy.
बचा बचा के छुपा छुपा के बचा बचा के छुपा छुपा के बचा बचा के छुपा छुपा के
पानी की इतनी किल्लत, कहीं ये आपका भविष्य तो नहीं? ऐसे भविष्य से बचने के लिए बारिश के पानी का संरक्षण कीजिए और पानी रखिए
बचा बचा के।
सोमवती, अब क्या परेशानी है?
कमजोरी है, चक्कर आता है।
वो तो ठीक हो जाएगा। अरे हाँ, तुम्हारा तो कुष्ठ रोग का इलाज चल रहा था ना? दिखाओ तो।
पूरे 3 महीने दवा खाई है।
6 या 12 महीने एमडीटी की दवा खानी है। पूरा कोर्स करने पर ही रोगी रोग मुक्त हो सकता है। और हाँ, यह दवा तो अब हर प्राथमिक स्वास्थ्य केंद्र पे मुफ्त मिलती है। फिर देर किस लिए? एमडीटी करे कमाल, कुष्ठ रोगी हुए खुशहाल।
कुष्ठ मुक्त भारत का सपना चलो साकार करें।
The committee also clarified its guidance on interest rates, emphasizing that the current near-zero range for the federal funds rate target likely will remain appropriate well past the time that the unemployment rate declines below 6.5%, especially if projected inflation continues to run below the committee's 2% longer-run goal.
Taper, taper, taper. The world economy waited for this throughout the year. Will the Fed taper or not? Finally, the word came out at 1 a.m. Indian Standard Time on 19th December. The Federal Reserve will reduce bond purchases to $75 billion a month from $85 billion. Thus, a calibrated and gradual reduction of the American stimulus instead of a sudden one as the world had feared. It was an extreme policy to begin with, something historically unprecedented and by definition unsustainable. But the size and timing of the move was unexpected by many and very likely carefully calculated. But let's rewind to mid of the year when the taper talk was rattling the world economy. From Brazil to South Africa to India to Indonesia to Korea, currencies were falling, markets were slumping. The reason? Fed's bond buying program or the American stimulus was injecting massive liquidity into the world economy. The massive liquidity fueled massive stock market rise, and the fear was a life after withdrawal of stimulus. Saddled with hefty current account and fiscal deficits, Indian economy looked most weak. The rupee went into a free fall, losing as much as 20% against the dollar before recovering. But finally it was a taper light, and by the time Indian policymakers were confident that India is ready for any kind of external shock from the US Central Bank. Finance Minister P. Chidambaram said that India is prepared to deal with the Fed taper. Markets too had factored in the decision of the Fed. Let's hear from the RBI Governor and the Finance Minister himself.
I think the market has already factored that in. It should not surprise the market. I believe it has not surprised the market, and I think the consequences should not be very large. Even if there are some consequences, I think we are much better prepared. We have taken a number of measures.
We are certainly focused continually on the external environment. As I've said before, we are in a better position to withstand the volatility stemming from tapering. Our current account deficit is significantly lower, and we have shown the ability to raise money if we need.
So all is well on that front. But staying with the largest economy in the world, the US government remained shut down for 18 days in October as Republicans and Democrats slug over budget and Obama's pet legislation, the healthcare reforms. And as the tug-of-war continued, US came to a shutdown. President Barack Obama blamed Republicans for an ideological crusade aimed at his healthcare program and urged lawmakers to vote to keep government operations running. But on the 1st of October, the inevitable happened. US government partially shut down for the first time in 17 years. Even the New York's iconic Statue of Liberty was closed down for public. Meanwhile, the Eurozone limped back to normalcy. The start of the year saw $10 billion bailout of Cyprus by Eurozone. The Greek central bank said that the country's economy is poised to return to growth next year after 6 years in recession. The Eurozone finance ministers agreed on a long-awaited pact on how to deal with falling banks in the region. It aims to create a €55 billion fund financed by the banking industry over next 10 years. The deal is a part of wider efforts by the region's economies towards building a banking union as they look to avoid taxpayer-funded bank bailouts. Moving to the world's second largest economy, nicknamed the dragon economy, China. China unwrapped its boldest set of economic and social reform in nearly 3 decades in November. China relaxed its one-child policy and said it will free up its markets in order to put Chinese economy on a more stable footing. Beijing also pledged to speed up opening of its capital account and further financial liberalization. The plans are the most significant since the series of reforms in late 1970s and early 1980s. Those changes eventually opened up the economy to the outside world and set it on the course to become champion economy of emerging markets. And if you talk about the Chinese economy, how can you leave behind Asia's other dynamic economy, the Indian economy? Rupee volatility was the biggest headache for India thanks largely to Fed's tapering fear. The rupee plummeted to 68 level in late August, but measures by the government in tandem with the Reserve Bank of India helped rupee stabilize to 62 mark against the dollar by the end of the year. The country still remains star of Asia. A report by Ernst & Young earlier in the year said that India has emerged as the most attractive investment destination, surpassing neighboring China and the US. On to Japan. Yes, it has been years since the Liberal Democratic Party won a landslide election victory, paving way for Shinzo Abe's second stint as Prime Minister. And 2013 has all been about his big spending policies, which has restored the Japanese economy to a healthy economy and won Abenomics a lot of fans. From global economics to global deals, Bali 2013 WTO summit, dubbed as a make or break summit, ended with a good news for everyone. The World Trade Organization reached its first ever trade reform deal to the roar of approval from nearly 160 ministers who had gathered on the Indonesian island of Bali to decide on the make or break agreement that could add $1 trillion to the global economy.
Where we're giving ourselves in the WTO 1 year to review what we have done before, take a look at what went right, take a look at what went wrong, and figure out the right mechanics, the right chemistry, the right type of engagement, the right type of ambition.
The agreement marks WTO's first global trade agreement since it was created in 1995 and rescues the World Trade Organization from the brink of failure and will rekindle confidence in its ability to lower barriers to trade worldwide after 12 years of fruitless negotiations. India emerged as a major gainer at WTO ministerial meet at Bali as members accepted its demands on food security that will protect India and other developing countries from penalties for breaching the domestic subsidy cap of 10% of value of production. In return, India has agreed to a new agreement on trade facilitation that will ease controls at ports and airports and may provide a boost of up to $1 trillion to the global economy.
I view this as a victory of the farmers of India, of the farmers who are subsistence farmers, resource-poor farmers of the entire developing countries. And there has also been a coalition of developing countries that India was able to put together along with its partners, which withstood all pressures, demonstrated solidarity, and achieved this.
Globally, the world economy saw ups and downs, but as always, the show must go on. On to other global news which made headlines. Twitter IPO won plenty of followers. Twitter went public this year. According to the documents filed with the US regulators, France, Japan, Russia, Saudi Arabia and South Africa are Twitter's fastest growing markets. General Motors no longer has the US taxpayer as a shareholder. The government sold all of its stake in the automaker, losing $11 billion on investment made as a part of the controversial bailout. Tech giants tell US stops spying. Apple, Google, Facebook, Twitter and 4 other American internet rivals have teamed up to tell the US it's gone too far. They're demanding in an open letter that the government curb its massive collection of personal data. And finally, Bitcoins, the currency of the future. Its value has soared in recent months, making Bitcoin a favorite with investors. But its popularity is causing a concern for authorities worldwide. The European Banking Authority has issued a formal warning to consumers. It said people have no protection if things go wrong because currently there is no regulation. Bitcoin could become the catalyst for continued shift from physical currencies to electronic ones.